Okay, great. Okay, so what I'm here to talk about today, first of all, thank you for being here. I know it's early in the morning for software developers, so thank you for getting up early. It's the last day of the conference. It's Friday. What we're going to talk about is building social software for the antisocial. Now, this is part 2. Now, in part 1, which I'm not going to cover, but you can find on the web, there were 5 scary ideas that I talked about that were not intuitive, but ideas that we used to build Stack Overflow that people would kind of fight you over. They would say, no, this can't be right. This is not the way the world works. You're doing this the wrong way. And when Joel and I looked at it, we said, well, no, this is actually the correct way. The other ways don't actually make sense. But this is part 2, Electric Boogaloo. So I'm going to give you 5 more scary rules that we came up with that we used to build out Stack Overflow into Stack Exchange. So if you know who I am, you might know about me through my blog, Coding Horror. You can certainly follow me there. It's been going since 2004. You might also know about me through my partnership with Joel Spolsky, another famous developer. We came together to build Stack Overflow. This was in 2008. And Stack Overflow is, of course, a Q&A site for software developers for a number of reasons, most of which we just wanted this information to exist on the internet. Now, what we're currently doing is taking Stack Overflow, this Q&A model of no nonsense, just the business, give me the answers type of Q&A to other topics. And you can see that at stackexchange.com. You can see we have math, we have another programmer site, we have an electronic site. It's still very geeky, so don't be afraid. It's still very, very geeky. But eventually we want to get further and further away from geeks. And that's kind of what I'm going to talk about today, is like taking the geek mentality, the programmer mentality of how you approach the world, and how that's actually a really effective way, I think, to look at the world. So I'm going to start with a joke. This is the same joke I used in the old presentation, so if you've already heard this, feel free to laugh in advance. But how do you tell an introverted computer programmer from an extroverted computer programmer? And the answer, of course, is the extroverted computer programmer is looking at your shoes when he talks to you, instead of his own shoes. Yeah. But that's an old joke. I'm going to give you a new joke that I haven't yet used in a presentation. What do computer science students use for birth control? And the answer, of course, their personalities, right? Now, this is a little mean. I apologize. That's a little mean, and I do apologize. That I don't actually mean that. I say it in fun because what I'm trying to point out is that the type of people that become software developers are really more comfortable with the machine than the people. I mean, I certainly put myself in that category. I mean, I'm sitting here talking to a room full of people, so I'm not that antisocial, right? I mean, I wouldn't be up here. I'd be afraid. But there's some truth to this, that we're very introverted, and the machine is sort of an outlet for not being with people. But then a weird thing happened, right? Like the internet happened. And all of a sudden, the computer really became social, accidentally. It's like, how did this happen? Like, I was in my bedroom on my Commodore 64, and I woke up, and all of a sudden, everybody's on my computer with me. What happened? But computers are simple, and people are really complicated. People are hard to figure out. Computers do exactly what you tell them to do, even if that makes no sense at all. But yet introverts like Mark Zuckerberg, and it's in a much lesser sense myself, I don't want to equate myself with Mark Zuckerberg because he's much more famous, but we're writing software that tries to dictate the behavior of people, right? Trying to say, hey, this is the way people should behave. How is that possible? Well, if you look back in history, we've written very, very complicated programs. This is 30 years old. If you want to feel really old, this is 30 years old. I feel ancient now. This is 30 years old. I love this game, right? But these are really complicated games, and this is in 1981 or whatever, and they've only gotten more complicated. So it's not like we're unafraid to write very, very complicated programs. And what I love about programmers is that they are the type of people that say, I want to create the rules. Like, I'm not satisfied just playing the game. I want to make a game. I want to change the game. I want to modify the game. And these things get very, very complicated. And if you look back again in history, a lot of programmers, myself in this category, got started by saying, I'm going to write my own game, on my computer. I'm tired of playing the games that are out there. I want to change the game. I want to modify the game. I'm not satisfied with the status quo. I want to create new games that I've created. But you still have this social situation, right? You're still in front of your computer. How does this work with people? And the answer is, why is this scary? Why are other people scary in a way that the computer isn't? They're very, very complicated systems. We can master the computer, but we cannot really master other people. They're scary because there are no rules. There are no rules to social engagements. When I see someone on the street, what am I supposed to say to them? I don't know. I could say anything. We could do anything. And that's what makes it really so scary. And I want to mention this is particularly scary for programmers, but you can try to put rules on social interactions, like the book How to Win Friends and Influence People, an excellent book. And really the reason this book works is because it's not even really a book of rules. This is a book about learning to be genuinely interested in the other people around you. To look at someone and say, wow, that's really interesting. I want to learn about you. I want to hear what you do that's cool. And that's the basis of this book. It's not really a book of rules. But then you have the downside. Books that are like, here's how to pick up women, right? Where you're really just, you're trying to game the system. You're like, I have an end goal. I don't really care about the person. All I care about is what I want to achieve. This is the wrong way to look at things. So I'm not really sure you can put rules on social interactions. And why is this particularly scary for programmers? I think it's scary for everyone, but it's particularly scary for programmers. And I think to understand this, you have to look at, I had an old blog entry, this is now 5 years old, about learning to program. And people had done research and said there's really two groups in any university that's trying to teach programming. There's the group of people that get it, okay, the sheep, and then there's a group of people that don't get it, the goats. And why is this? Why do we have these two different groups that have their own independent bell curve? And the answer that they found was that they could predict who could learn how to program. If you could look at a problem, come up with an arbitrary set of rules, and follow it slavishly to whatever conclusion that those rules brought you, you could become a programmer. But if you couldn't, you would never really make it over that hump. You would never really make it over the hump from being a goat into a sheep that can actually program. So what I want to point out here is programmers are married to the rules. Like, the rules own us. Like, we've internalized the rules so much that without rules, we have no context of we're vulnerable. We can't understand how these social interactions work because they have no rules. And that is completely antithetical to who you are as a programmer. But what's cool about stuff like Facebook is this is exactly what Facebook did. They said, wow, social relationships are confusing, but that's okay. We can write a program to figure that out, right? Which is really crazy if you think about it. It's like, okay, you're on my list of friends now. Who does this? Who has a list of their friends at home? I mean, that's insane. But yeah, that's what you do on Facebook. You kind of like, okay, here's my friends, here's my work. And you're putting rules on things that previously did not have rules. And, I think this works. I'm very ambivalent towards Facebook, but this idea of taking rules and applying them to social situations actually makes a lot of sense, primarily because you start looking at it as a game. You think rules are bad, right? Rules are dumb. Why do I have to listen to your stupid rules, man? But games have rules, and games are fun. Okay? Nobody looks at a game and says, this is all a bunch of stupid rules. Well, that's what a game is, So when you play Magic the Gathering, yes, you're sitting down and saying, I'm going to learn this completely arbitrary set of rules that makes no sense at all, but we're going to have fun playing this game. And that's a completely accepted relationship. And I didn't realize it at the time, but this is a Stack Exchange site. Early on, role-playing games got launched. Board and card games got launched. I didn't really make the connection in my mind then that I'm making now. But these are, again, programmers seeking out rules for social situations. So you have a game like Settlers of Catan, which is very popular in geek circles. And notice we're playing it with other people. And it's not scary anymore because there's a structure to the relationship. There's a structure to this interaction where you're saying, okay, we're going to play the game together. The game is arbitrary. The game is completely arbitrary, but it's fun. And we'll learn something about each other. We'll talk to each other, and we'll talk about the game. We'll talk about other things. But it's no longer scary because there's structure to it. Okay, there's a way to engage with other people where you've added structure where there was no structure before. And of course, even with people that aren't geeks, that play poker or chess or checkers, this is the same basic rule. There's always rules. And the rules aren't there to keep you down. The rules are there, because again, you get this mindset of, I'm on the internet, why do I have to subscribe to your stupid rules? I should be able to do exactly what I want. And on Stack Overflow, or any Stack Exchange site, this is the list of reasons for which we will close a question. In other words, you ask a question that really wasn't appropriate for the network. So you have violated the rules. Even if you didn't know the rules existed or weren't willing to learn the rules exist. But I think part of accepting the rules is understanding this is a social contract. Okay? If you don't want to learn the rules, you can't play the game. You can't sit down in a Magic game and go, I don't have time to learn all these rules, I'm just going to throw a bunch of cards around because I'm bored. That's not playing the game. That's not why it's there. And the rules are there to protect the integrity of the game, and more importantly, to protect the players so that it's fair for everyone that's playing the game. So the rules really are part of the common good. Rules aren't bad. Rules are fun, and rules are part of the common good. But then you might think, okay, well, what's the purpose of this game? Why are we playing this game? Why are we doing this? And I would also posit that any modern website, and all websites are kind of social websites now, in my opinion, is now game design. Whenever you're designing a website, you are designing a game, whether you like it or not. And this really bit us on Stack Overflow. So if you go to Wikipedia and look up this topic called gamification, this is a word that did not exist in 2008 when we launched Stack Overflow. Didn't exist. Nobody had coined this phrase. And yet, if you go to the Wikipedia entry, we're listed, which I was like, whoa, I didn't put that there. Someone else put that there. But it's really true. When I designed Stack Overflow, I accidentally made it a game, because that's very natural for me as a programmer. That's the way I want to see the world. So you want to play the Q&A game. So how do you play the Q&A game? Well, you have a question, okay? Hopefully, the type of question that can be answered. Again, see the rules, right? And if you don't, it'll be closed. So how do you get an answer to your question? What do you do? Well, the first step of any game is like, I got to, step one, like, put your piece on the table, ask a question. So this is the bicycle site. How do you ask a question? Like, what do you do? Where do you go here? So one of the criticisms we get is like, you know what? It's really hard to ask a question. Like, I go to the site and like, I want to ask a question, and I can't really figure out how to ask a question. And you're doing it wrong. You've designed the game incorrectly. You should have designed the game more like this. Here, it's very clear what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to ask a question. But this is actually incorrect game design. What you don't want people to do is come to the site and immediately start asking questions, because they don't know what the game is. They haven't learned the game. They're just going to immediately start typing whatever pops into their friggin' head right in that box. And believe me, if you've been to answers.com, that's not good. The quality speaks for itself. So the fact that you go here and you're like, wow, it's kind of subtle that there's ask question up there. This is completely intentional. You're supposed to go to the site and watch what other people are doing. Just like if you sat down at a table and people were playing, Settlers of Catan or whatever, you would watch them. It's like, interesting, a game. Let me watch. Let me see what they're doing. Let me see if I like it, right? That's what you're supposed to do. So I can always tell people that don't get it when they're like, you know what you guys should do? Well, that phrase is always bad in general, but in particular, it's like, you got to make it easier to ask a question. It's like, no, we need to make it harder to ask a question. But it's a balancing act. You do want questions. We have actually gone back and forth on that. So let's say I ask a question. This is a question I actually asked on bicycles, because I had this question, because I have a son. He's almost 3 now, and we're trying to figure out like bike seat versus bike trailer. I did ask it as a shell account, but that account says it's me on it, so it's not a trick or anything. So I got this question, I asked it, and so I've achieved step 1 of the game. I've actually asked the question, but what next? What do I do? How do I get my question answered? Like, what's the point of this game? So if you look at the question, there's a bunch of numbers, right? Like, if I look here on the right-hand side of the question, there's some tags. I can figure out what those are. There's a view counter. A view counter. Interesting. What is this number? Views. What do I do to get it to go up? What does it mean? How does it work? You might look on the left and see, there's another big number by my question. Like, it doesn't really explain what that is. You can mouse over it, and it'll sort of give you a tooltip and explain what it is and so forth. But it's not prescriptive. And you might say, what's this number? How do I get it to go up? Obviously, I want people to like my question, right? How do I get them to vote for my question? What does that mean to vote for a question? You might look at this number at the top. Oh, look, there's a number next to my name. What does that mean, right? Is that a measure of my worth as a human being? What is that? It is, actually. But no, you might say, like, what does this mean? Like, what do I get if I get this number to go up? What does that mean? Like, how does this work? And the cool thing about this is, as you're doing this, we have this concept of badges. So as you do stuff you're just normally supposed to do, you will get badges. This is like achievements in the Xbox 360 model, where you do something, and then the system will say, hey, you did X. Awesome. Here's a badge. So for example, some badges you could get for this, if somebody votes up my question, I would get the student badge. If I decide, hey, I want to read the FAQ, I want to read the rules, I want to understand the game, I'm going to get the rule book and page through it, there's a badge for reading the FAQ. If you read every section of the FAQ, you get a badge. So you can all go do that on Stack Overflow. Go read. You must read every section, though, not just click on it. If you get a certain number of views, you will get a badge as well. And this is just the entry-level badges. There's much more difficult badges to get. These are the badges you get for just, hey, thank you for doing the correct thing in the system. Right? You asked a question that somebody liked. That's good. You asked a question that a lot of people viewed. That's good. That's the way this is supposed to work. So what's happening here? So raise your hand if when you buy a video game, you go home and immediately read the manual before playing the game. Right? Okay, that one guy. I'm sorry. Right, you're not supposed to do that. So the way it works is you go home, you're like, I want to learn the video game, so you put in the video game. You learn the video game by playing the video game. That's why when people approach us, it's like, you should have a video tutorial, or you should have a... I'm like, no, you don't get it. Like, you learn the game by playing the game, okay? This is what game design is. Nobody, the first level is a tutorial. Even if it doesn't say tutorial, it's like, wow, there's only one enemy here, and he has no guns. It's like, how am I going to take him out? Or look, a box, I have to jump over it. It's really easy, but that's okay. That's what you want at that stage. You're just learning how to play the game. And it feels fun because you're playing the game. You're not playing a tutorial. You're playing the first level of the game. And then eventually, as you get better at the game lets you do more. It gives you much more dangerous weapons. It gives you more dangerous enemies. It gives you more things that you can do that are potentially very confusing. And that's the way we do it on Stack Exchange. As you gain reputation, you unlock more abilities. Some of them can be dangerous, like downvoting. That's dangerous, right? That's negative. You're like, I don't like this. This is inappropriate. Flagging is unlocked. You can cause damage with these abilities, but presumably you've learned how to play the game, and you have the right to now potentially blow yourself up if you want to. And the other cool thing about Stack Exchange is, we're talking about a game where when you get up from the couch after finishing the game, what do you really have to show for your time? Like, you've played Halo, you've been entertained, and there's nothing wrong with entertainment. I'm not here to decry the value of entertainment. What I'm saying is you can have your cake and eat it too. You can be entertained, and you can also learn something at the same time. And that is what Stack Exchange is. It's when you come back from 3 hours of participating on Stack Overflow or Superuser or ServerFault or any Stack Exchange site, you're like, look, I made a breadcrumb trail of my awesomeness, and you guys can all follow it now, right? Like, look how cool I am. Look at all the stuff I did. You created stuff. Not only did you create stuff, you created a path for other people to follow and to learn from and to build on. When people participate on Stack Overflow, that's what they're doing in very, very small ways. I mean, literally a breadcrumb. It's a tiny bit of information that makes the world better. Somebody can now solve a problem thanks to what you contributed, or because you asked that question, other people can now find it and get an answer to what their problem they were trying to solve. So there's really 3 levels, I think, to the Stack Exchange game. There's the game, metagame, and endgame. The immediate game is just, I want my problem solved. Like, I can't get this code to compile. I don't understand why. I've tried all this stuff. Please help me. That's your problem. But then there's a metagame. It's like, oh, I have reputation. I can get badges. I can earn privileges. I can become a moderator on this site. Wow, that's cool, right? And peers will recognize me when I do cool stuff. It's like, wow, cool, 5 upvotes for this answer. My peers really like what I'm doing. They think I know what I'm talking about. But really, what we're trying to show people is really the end game. Is really what this is about is love of the topic. Like, we're here because, God, we love programming. Like, I would do this all day long. I would do this even if nobody paid me to do it. Or I'm a cyclist. It doesn't have to be limited to programming. That's the other thing we're looking into. We want to do this for everybody who's passionate about X, where X is just something that you love. You want to make the world a better place for X. And a lot of the internet, frankly, is very crappy, right, for a lot of topics. I mean, this is what caused us to start Stack Overflow, was seeing experts exchange and seeing how they were kind of really ruining a part of the internet. And Joel and I said, this is wrong. Like, they shouldn't be doing this. This shouldn't be working. There should be an alternative, and we built one, and this is it. So the cool thing about this is you can be selfish and selfless at the same time. You can solve your problem, but you can also solve it for everyone that has that problem, which is fantastic. So ultimately, what you're doing is we're building an oasis of really high-quality information for other people to find and enjoy. I like to refer to it as like a national park. It's a place you can go, to enjoy, this very pure form of information that's very, very high signal and low noise. And it's a public resource that we all help take care of. You can go on Stack Overflow right now and click Edit or Improve, and you can change anything on there with no reputation at all. It's very much like Wikipedia in that regard, and all of our sites are like that. If you see something wrong, click Edit and change it. Help us make it better. Help us improve our public park. And everything that we put out there is Creative Commons. We don't own you. You license your contributions to us. You license your contributions to the world, okay? So at no point could we pull all the data and say, you know what, we decided we're going to put up a paywall, right? Which has happened like so many times on the internet. Like, you have all this great content contributed by the users, and then all of a sudden it's just gone. They decided, oh, we have other corporate ulterior motives. We're going to pull that. Creative Commons says we cannot do that. It's impossible. First of all, the data's already out there. And second, we abide by the terms of the license. That's our contract with the community. So scary idea number 8, remember 1 through 5 are in the previous presentation, is that the thoughtful game design is how you create a sustainable community. Okay? The point of the game is almost like government, right? The ultimate end result of the game is you get governance within the community. So there's this book, Finite and Infinite Games. It's kind of a philosophical book, but it has some neat points in it. And the one I like is that this idea that there's an invariable principle of play that whoever plays is playing because they can play. Like if anyone's telling you to play, like you have to play because you're being paid to play, it's work, it is no longer play. Okay? So everything else is by definition work with the big W. So, work that's done of your own volition out of pure joy for play. And this game doesn't end. It's called an infinite game for a reason. Now, this has game theory implications because one of the cool things about the prisoner's dilemma and stuff like that is once you add history, once people remember the previous round, all of a sudden there's consequences for acting like a jerk, okay? And people will remember how you behaved in previous rounds, and this is basically the trick to getting this to work. So if you follow Penny Arcade at all, you're probably familiar with what's called the gift, the greater internet fuckwad theory, where you take a normal person, make them anonymous, give them an audience, and then they become a jerk, right? Everybody's seen this happen. I mean, it happens on every website in the world. And you would think, okay, this is such a truism that the only way to solve this is to remove anonymous. You cannot have anonymous. Everyone must use their real name. This is the Facebook answer. This is the Google Plus answer. I do not believe it is actually the correct answer. I think it's actually possible to get good behavior from semi-anonymous people without withdrawing anonymous from the table. And let me explain why I think that is. So if you look at a game like Counter-Strike, now I played a lot of Counter-Strike. I started playing Counter-Strike in like 1999 when it was a very new game, and it's still being played. But the interesting thing about Counter-Strike from a game design standpoint is this idea that in Counter-Strike, when you start playing around, when you die, you're dead. You're gone. You cannot come back for the entire round. And these rounds can last anywhere from a couple minutes to maybe even like 10 minutes. So you're like, how could that be fun? How could it be fun to sit for 6 minutes doing nothing because I got killed immediately at the beginning of the game? Like, that's not fun, right? This is a horribly broken game design. And that's initially what I thought. I was like, this can't work. But people were playing. I was like, why are they playing this game where you die and you're out? Like, you want to respawn, you want to get right back to action immediately, obviously. But what I found was an interesting thing. When you played Counter-Strike and you died, you had to watch other people play who were better than you, by definition. They didn't get killed yet, right? Either lucky or better, but usually better. Statistically, they were better. And so you spend all this time watching people play the game. You're like, my God, this is how they do it, right? This is how they live so long. They're much more careful than I am. They have a certain strategy that they're doing. The game was teaching you. It was forcing you to learn from the other players in the game how to play the game better, right? And there were consequences to your death. And again, that theory of consequences, like the history of just having a consequence to getting killed. Whereas when you get killed and you respawn immediately, it's like, well, who cares? I'll die and then I'll just be right back. So who cares, right? So what you learned from this was that really you could not win alone. Like, I don't care how good you are at Counter-Strike, you had to have your teammates help you win. It was just impossible to win by yourself. And even if you were the best player, on the server, you cannot single-handedly win with skill. Skill alone is not really enough. You have to have teamwork to win. You have to have the cooperation of your teammates to actually achieve the objective on the map, which is planting the bomb or defusing the bomb. And then you also learn that, like, being the Rambo and rushing off and just saying, I'm going to just rush this way, rarely ends well, right? And just like in real life. It's like, it's usually helpful to think a little bit about, like, what's our strategy? How should we approach this? Maybe I should be a little more careful when going around that corner. That's the kind of stuff that pays off. And the game taught you this entirely just automatically because it had a certain design. And it forced you to play as a team. Even if you didn't want to, even if you started and you're like, screw the other guys, I'm playing for myself, I want to have a lot of kills, you couldn't win that way. It was impossible. The game design prevented it. And the other really brilliant thing about it, even with anonymous players, because for a lot of multiplayer games, what they tell you is, oh, you have to play with friends. The only way to get a good experience is you have to play with your friends, and then your friends, they'll listen to you and they'll do stuff. But this is a cop-out, in my opinion. A really well-designed game works with completely anonymous people because the game design is channeling them towards the right behaviors that you need to win the game. That is good game design. And that was what was so brilliant about Counter-Strike, was that it fired on every cylinder. It just worked. All my teammates were just my friends, right? I didn't know these people, but I loved them. Like, I wanted to win with them because we loved the game. We wanted to win at the game. And we were connected. That's what connected us. And this is the same thing. And this is still going on, of course. I just want to point out that Counter-Strike is very much well alive. You can go play it right now. There's probably 50,000 people playing as I'm talking. So it's, again, an infinite game. The design of the game lets it survive forever. Counter-Strike will probably be around for another 10 years, which is crazy, but it will. And so in some ways, Stack Exchange is kind of like my Counter-Strike. It's my attempt to design a game that's self-sustaining, that actually produces something useful and interesting and helpful, and works with completely anonymous people. Even people who try to attack the game can't attack it because the design channels them towards, oh, well, you want to win, right? Well, of course they want to win. Then you have to play the game the correct way. So on Stack Exchange, you can't win without teaching other people, okay? The way you get reputation on any Stack Exchange site is by being knowledgeable and being willing to share that knowledge in a way that people can understand. You're learning and you're teaching. That's how you win. That's the only way to win. And no matter, even if you're, the best C#, say you're a .NET like Eric Lippert, a .NET engine expert, you have massive skill. But what really makes it work is communication skill. So even if you just know a little thing, if you can communicate that effectively to other programmers, you'll win. So it's a combination of a little bit of skill and a little bit of communication skill, okay? Now, if you're like Eric Lippert, luckily you have a lot of both, so you're kind of winning in both ways. But it equalizes the game. You don't have to be a guru. You just have to know a little bit more than your peers and be willing to share it. The other thing it teaches you is that discussion is risky. This concept of let's just have a random discussion. Well, those are the types of things that tend to get downvoted and shut down on Stack Exchange. But what works is sharing research and experience. So if you can learn to do that, like those are the things that will help you succeed, not just on Stack Exchange, but in some ways really in life itself. And the end result is advancing knowledge of programming, or physics, or mathematics, or whatever the topic is. For everyone in the world who loves that topic as much as you do, you've helped make the world a little bit better place for that topic. And that topic's going to be there after we're all dead. Physics is going to be here after I'm dead. Math is going to be here after I'm dead. All I can really do is help advance it a little bit. That whole thing about standing on the shoulders of giants, right? That's what we're here to do. And even in a little way, even in 5 minutes on Stack Exchange, you can do that. And the other cool thing is, like, literally if you have 5 minutes, you don't have to be a hardcore player to get the benefit. For example, the average Stack Exchange question it's asked once, it's answered maybe 1 to 5 times, but then it's viewed 100,000, maybe even 10,000, 100,000 times. So you're at this part of the pyramid where just a small bit of participation gives you this huge pyramid of use and benefit to everybody who needs that information. So you don't have to be a hardcore player. You don't have to dedicate your life to playing Counter-Strike. You can play 1 round and help your team win. So the 9th scary idea is that the community isn't always right about what it wants, and that groups aren't good at predicting the consequences of their collective actions. So you might think, okay, well, Stack Exchange is kind of a democracy, and it is. We try to make it a democracy as much as we can. But democracy does not mean do everything that the community wants. In fact, this can often lead to the destruction of the site. So the first rule of sort of the Stack Exchange game is really this. You're going to ask a question. Please ask a practical, answerable question based on some real problem that you have. Now, that seems like a really simple rule, right? Like, well, who would not ask a question like that? But you get a lot, like, why can't we have discussions? Why can't we just have a discussion about X? Stuff like this. What's your favorite X? I use this. What do you guys use? What if Canon merged with Nikon? Or like, Cobalt sucks, right? Well, what's wrong with these? In a nutshell, they're soliciting opinions, right? And opinions are great, but they're not really the way that we learn. Like, everybody has an opinion, and opinions are cool. I don't begrudge anyone their opinion on anything, but we're trying to do something a little bit deeper on Stack Exchange than just solicit opinions. And there's other places where you can do discussion. If you want to do discussion, the internet is full of places you can go to have those discussions. So these chatty, open-ended questions actually push other practical questions off the site. And on top of that, people say, well, okay, fine. You don't like discussions. Well, I'm sorry for you. You should like discussions. If you don't like them, just don't look at them, right? You can have these questions. Just don't look. We'll have our discussions in the corner, and you won't have to pay attention to it, Jeff. But the problem with that is really twofold. One is the broken window theory, that people see discussion questions, people having discussion about, is Java good, is Java bad, which has been had 50 billion times, first of all. And they say, okay, this is what this site is about. So I'll also ask a question, is C# good or bad? Is .NET good or bad? And the other problem is it's an opportunity cost. Everybody who wastes their time answering, is Java good or not, could have been answering a more practical question or asking a more practical question that actually helps people and isn't just a random discussion. So again, this is where the community will fight you over this. They'll say, you just need to not look at these. It's okay for us to have these discussions, but it's really not, okay, because it's actively harmful to the community in a way that they can't fully understand. Now, one thing we do is if you go to any Stack Exchange site and start answering a question as a new user with no reputation, what happens is there's a little slider that pops up, and it tries to educate you just in time, okay? This concept of, again, the game tutorial, this is a just-in-time lesson about how do you answer a Stack Exchange question, okay? Well, first of all, answer the damn question, right? I mean, this seems obvious, but a lot of times you have people that go on tangents or don't actually answer the question as asked. And you can lecture the person asking, but you still have to answer and then lecture. It's like, okay, what you're trying to do makes no sense whatsoever, which is a valid answer, but like explain why, Don't just lecture somebody, actually answer their question. But more importantly, this is not a discussion forum. Please provide research and evidence to support your answer of some kind, And we're not Wikipedia, right? We're not going to demand that everything be cited and remove your content if it's not cited. Well, there is one site. Skeptics will do that to you. But generally, we're not. We're just trying to do science here a little bit, right? We want to have a reason for doing something rather than just because I said so. Okay? That's great. I mean, maybe you're the world's preeminent expert on Java. That's fine. But you can't just say, because I said so. You have to provide a rationale and explanation that explains, okay, right, that makes sense. That's why we should do it this way. Not because you said so, but because there's actual science, or research or examples that you can give that prove this to be true. The other thing we ask for is that questions be reasonably scoped, And people sometimes want to ask really broad questions that aren't specific enough. And let me give you an example. So this is from, you don't have to read this. This is a wall of text. I apologize. You're not supposed to put walls of text on slide. You don't actually have to read this. This might hurt your head if you try to read it, actually. But basically, the answer to this business question is go read a book, right? Learn more about business before coming to us with, how do I run a business? I mean, that was basically that guy's question. Our site doesn't replace books. We're not, and there's an asymmetry here, too. If you're asking a question that requires a medical degree to answer, are we supposed to teach you a medical degree? I mean, that's highly asymmetric. You've asked a single line or maybe a paragraph question. In return, you get, a 12-page essay. This doesn't scale. This isn't fair, right? So one thing we do ask, one of the rules of Stack Exchange, is you have to do some research before asking. I mean, the old adage, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Well, there are lots of stupid questions. But they're usually only stupid because the person asking spent no time researching before they asked. That is what we find objectionable. What have you tried? What happened when you tried that? What other things did you try? What research did you do that you can share with us? You got to do your homework. Okay, this is just like being at school. If you're going to be at an institution of learning, what's the one thing you have to commit to do? You have to commit to do the homework, right? You have to do the work if you're going to be at a place of learning. And not doing the work is one of the cardinal sins. And the pushback we get on this sometimes is, well, but this is such a great place to ask questions. It's so high quality that I'm sure if you just let me ask this one question the way I want to, I'll get a great answer and everything will be fine. But what they don't understand is the reason it's a great place to ask questions is because we don't allow stuff like that. It's sort of this catch-22. If we allow what you want to happen here, it stops being the place you want to go anyway. So this is, again, where the community wants what is ultimately destructive. And, it's not really wrong to say to someone, look, you're not a bad person for wanting to ask this question. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make your question wrong, but this is not the right question for our site. Basically, you need to go somewhere else with your question in the nicest possible way, not in a rude way, not in a mean way, but in an acknowledgement of, look, we're playing the Stack Exchange game here. You want to play by a different set of rules, therefore, you need to go to another site on the internet where they have those rules, right? And, I bring up the Steve Jobs quote because it's really true. If you can't say no, if you can't say this is what we are, and this is what we are not, and you let the community push you into being what you're not, you stop being useful, okay? You destroy the thing that you are. And this is the paradox of community. Like, they will really pull you in destructive directions sometimes. They don't mean to, but you have to educate them. And this is where we get into moderation. So one thing we've learned, this is the 10th scary idea, is that moderation is really required to have an effective community site. You cannot have an unmoderated site that survives, in my opinion. It doesn't work. Largely because, well, there's a number of reasons, but one of the big ones is that popularity is kind of a curse. The things that become really popular are not always the things you want on your site. Okay, this seems paradoxical. It's like, well, Jeff, that doesn't make sense because we want to have a really big website. We want it to work. We want people to love it. Therefore, we want lots of popular content on our site. Sure. But popularity is not the only thing that matters. So what you typically see in programming circles is what they call bike shedding, where you stop having a technical discussion and you're having discussion about what color should we paint the bike shed. And all of a sudden, everybody has an opinion. Because it doesn't take any effort to have an opinion about what color the bike shed should be painted. But it's not really a useful discussion. So here's some questions that we've actually removed from Stack Overflow that were asked early on. And again, they're not bad people for asking these questions. This was early in the life of Stack Overflow, before we had figured this stuff out. They were like, oh, cool, best keyboard for programmers. That sounds good. I'm a programmer. I need a keyboard. I love keyboards, actually. But there was something wrong with these questions. The first thing we noticed for all these questions was, well, gee, these could be infinite. There could be an infinite number of answers to this question, right? What single discovery has given you the best boost in productivity? I mean, there could be an unlimited number of answers to that. And if it can have unlimited answers, is it really a question? I mean, what is it at that point? It's not really an answerable question. It's something else. It's a poll. It's a survey. It's a list of opinions, you know? It doesn't make it wrong, but it doesn't really fit with what we're trying to do. It doesn't really make the world that much better. And that's kind of what we're trying to do with Stack Exchange. So when we would remove this stuff, as we ultimately decided to do, it was like, okay, this stuff has to be removed. It doesn't work anymore. You know, we got huge objections. How could you possibly close this question? Look how popular it was. Everybody loved this question. There was so much that I could learn from this question in a very random way, actually. But popularity is not the only metric that matters. It is an important metric, but you know, if popularity was the only metric that mattered, we'd all be listening to the Spice Girls right now. Because clearly they were popular, they must be a very significant musical act. You know? But that's the peril of popularity. So let me talk a little bit about, I've been playing a lot of Battlefield 3, which is awesome, by the way. Love that game. I am coding horror on Origin if you want to add me. But I've been spending a lot of time on Reddit. And I feel bad because Alexis gave the keynote on Wednesday, and he's like, I said some nice things about you in the keynote. I was like, I'm going to say some mean things about you in my keynote. But no, I like this Reddit. What I'm pointing out here is there's some risks in the Reddit model. It's generally a good model, but it's broken in a lot of ways that are surprising. So I spent a lot of time here. And one thing that I was noticing over time as Battlefield 3 got released and got more popular, the quality of the information on the Reddit really declined, like a lot. Like I would go there and I was like, why am I even here? It's like, what am I learning by going to this Reddit? Or why do I even go here in the first place? Like, why would you go to the Battlefield 3 Reddit? Well, I go because I want to learn more about the game. Battlefield 3 is a really complicated game with a lot of sandbox type effects, and I want to learn how to play. Like, I love the game, and I want to learn more about it. But I came here, and I found out I was being more entertained than I was learning anything. And other members noticed this, and they actually opened a question on the Reddit itself saying, look, you know, we have these image macros, rage comics, and generally just stuff that doesn't matter is dominating this Reddit. You know, this is not good. And then, of course, you know, I said, cool story, bro. Right? Because that's what you do with meme comics. You stop having reasonable conversations and you start degrading to this least common denominator form of communication that doesn't really mean anything. I mean, it's funny, but it doesn't mean anything. You know, they're quick and they're easy to process. Like, you're like, oh, look, funny image, funny image, funny image, funny image. And, you know, pretty soon you're reading, you know, a comic book. You're not reading a novel anymore. You're not learning anything. You know, you're being just purely entertained. And it's seductive because it's faster to view an image than it is to read text. Like somebody writes a really thoughtful critique of something about Battlefield 3, and you're like, I don't have time for that. I want to see an image. You know, I don't want to think. And you stop thinking, right? This is incredibly dangerous. And I was really surprised to learn that the people on the Reddit said, look, the only way this has ever been solved, the only way we've ever fixed this problem is through active moderation. And I said, yes, exactly. That is exactly what I have learned as well. The community has to be protected from itself. If you leave the community alone, it will do nothing but produce these rage and meme comics and dominate the site with entertainment. And everybody stops learning. And all the people that were interested in learning stop going there, because why would they? This is no longer a place of learning. This is a place of entertainment, which isn't wrong, but it's a different experience. So when we look at moderation, you're not really trying to punish the community. What you really want to do is temporarily overrule them, okay? And say, look, I know you guys want to post these rage meme comics, but let me explain to you why that's a bad idea. You are trying to educate them about what the nature of the site is and why it's important and what works and what doesn't. You know, because they can't always see that in the way that you can. And they will often fight you to the death over this stuff. Like, I must be able to post my meme comic. You don't understand, I need to post this, it's hilarious, people need to see this. They're not wrong, but they need to refocus that exuberance on something more substantive, on stuff that helps people learn about the game and how to play the game and makes the Reddit interesting and makes people like me want to go there. And ultimately, it's leadership, right? You know, you're taking these moderators and you're saying, look, lead the community, show them the way this is supposed to be, and how we make this stuff work, and why it's so great. And one of our biggest mistakes, people ask you, like, what's your biggest mistake? Well, I have a great answer for that because I have a huge mistake that we made in Stack Overflow early on. We did not have a meta. And I really resisted this idea that you have to have a meta. I was like, no, just don't discuss Stack Overflow, which is the wrongest thing you can possibly say. And later I realized what a huge mistake this was, because the place you go to discuss the place, in other words, the place people on Stack Overflow would go to discuss, why does voting work this way? Why do we allow this question and not this question? This is where the leadership comes from, okay? If you don't have a meta, if you don't have a place for people to go, it's like, listen, this is the approved place that everybody goes to talk about the thing, right? Then you're giving up all your governance. You're giving up this is the place where governance is born. This is the place where moderators are born. You have to have this. And every Stack Exchange site, we did get this right for Stack Exchange, every Stack Exchange site that's launched has a meta that goes with it in lockstep. They always go together, right? So moderation clearly requires power because you have to defy the community at some point. You have to sort of resist the impulses of the community, and this takes actual power, you know? Oh, this has 100 upvotes. Well, I don't care. It's still not right for this site. Your 100 upvotes of the community do not overrule the moderator. And a lot of people, again, will fight you to the death on that. It's like, well, those 100 upvotes should overrule that moderator, right? But it's really not true. The moderation does have to scale with the community. So as you get more members, say you go from 1,000 members to 10,000 members, well, you now need more moderators. So how do you get more moderators? Do you keep finding moderators? I mean, our strategy on Stack Exchange is no, we want to make everybody a moderator in some small way, okay? Everybody shares the discipline of helping make the site a better place. What I equate this to is if you're in a modern city, there's a trash can on every corner, right? So if you're just a normal citizen of the city and you see trash on the street, and sometimes I do this, because it's easy, I'll pick up the trash and I'll put it in the receptacle at the corner. Okay? Because someone said, hey, if we had trash receptacles at every corner, an average person might help us keep the city clean. Rather than hiring maintenance workers to sweep through the city and clean everything up all the time, how about if average citizens just kind of helped us do this? And the way you make that work is, A, you make it easy to do, right? You put trash cans on every corner, but also you explicitly grant power. And this is what we do on Stack Exchange. As you get reputation, you unlock these privileges. And some of these privileges are, very moderatory. Like the big significant one is at 3,000, you can vote to close a question. You can say, look, this question doesn't belong here and should go elsewhere, either off the site or another site on the network or so forth. And at 2,000 reputation, you can edit everybody's post in the system without asking permission. You've unlocked editorial ability on the site. If you ever see anything wrong, you have 2,000 rep on any Stack Exchange site, you just go do it. You don't have to ask. It doesn't have to be approved. You just go do it. And this is something that you've earned by being just a regular member of the community. It's what we call the mini moderators. But it's also a democracy. We do elect members of the community to be moderators. And they're elected by people like you that participate on Stack Overflow and have, I think it's 100 reputation or some nominal amount. There's an election going on right now on Stack Overflow. If you go to Stack Overflow/election, you can actually participate in this election as long as you have the required reputation to be a citizen to vote. There's a nominal reputation requirement. And we actually beefed up the requirements for this election. If you note down there at the bottom, it says, an eligible candidate must have all the following badges: civic duty, strunk and white, deputy, and convention. Now, these are all badges that this is new, these are all badges that we view as emblematic of leadership, or at least some very high level of participation. Civic duty is voting 300 times. Strunk and white is editing, I think, 600 posts that aren't yours. Deputy is flagging. When you see a problem, you can flag it. Deputy is flagging successfully a certain number of times. Convention is a certain amount of participation on the meta, probably the most critical criteria for moderator. So the way moderators work, the way I like to think of them is, if we've created this oasis of information that's like a national park, the moderators are park rangers. They're the ones that help the park protect itself. They're there not to protect the community, but to protect the park. They're there to respect the community and listen to the community, but ultimately, they understand, and this is where we talked about the 3 levels of the game, metagame, and endgame. They understand the endgame. The endgame is we have to do things that make programming better, right? Even if the community wants, to talk about their favorite programming cartoon, that doesn't help us advance the craft of programming, really. It doesn't. So they're part of the public trust, right? And that's kind of how I view myself a little bit, is like I'm a park ranger, I'm helping supervise all the parks. But that doesn't mean that the moderators are infallible. I mean, we really do try to make it a democracy. So if you ever have a problem with the way moderation is happening on Stack Overflow or any Stack Exchange site, go to the meta, click Ask Question, and say, hey, I don't understand why moderation is working this way. As a citizen of the site, you have the right to ask that question, and you have the right to have it discussed, and you have the right to question anything that happens on the site. And this is where we spend most of our time at the network level, at the Stack Exchange level, thinking about how is this thing supposed to work? How are we going to change this? How is this model going to evolve and adapt to become better? We do it by really listening to the community on all the metas, on all the Stack Exchange sites. The citizens have input into the direction of the network. And nowhere is this really more clear than Area 51. If you go to area51.stackexchange.com, this is where we decide what topics, what Q&A topics there should be in the network. Because early on, we were really torn because we started with Stack Overflow, and then we launched Server Fault, which is for system administrators, a baby step outside programming. Then we launched Super User, which is for power computer users, hardcore PC nuts, again, a baby step outside programmers. But then we were sort of torn. It's like, well, what topics should we have for Q&A? We knew we wanted more, but like, what do we do? And this was really Joel's baby to come up with this, was to say, look, let's let the community decide what Q&A topics there should be on our network. And they do that by proposing. It's very much like, again, let's talk about democracy. You propose a bill. My bill says there should be a Stack Exchange site about firearms, okay? Because I love firearms, and I think there's a lot of people that would really enjoy it. So you propose it. You then have to propose questions for the site. Well, if there was a firearms site, here are the questions that I would ask on it that make sense to me. And here's some of the questions I wouldn't ask that wouldn't make sense. You're defining the boundaries of the topic. This is what firearms is. This is what firearms is not. That's really essential in a Q&A site, is to figure out, like, what are you talking about? The boundaries of the topic. Once you've established the boundaries of the topic, well, who else would support this? If there was a site about firearms, would you come? Would you come? Would you come? Would you come? And if enough people commit to the site, we launch it. We launch it as a private beta for just the people who committed. And they come in, and they ask questions, they seed the site, and we see, is it working? And Joel and I have said many times, we're not going to launch sites that aren't working, that are not making the internet better, that are just duplicating information that's out there, or that aren't essentially improving the quality of information that's available on this topic in some way. And we are very willing to shut down sites that aren't working. Not in a malicious way, but just because it's not working. When it's not working, it's obvious that it's not working. And you don't want to have a ghost town. That's the other downside. It's like, well, you could just launch the site and it would just be there and it wouldn't hurt anything, but it does because it's a ghost town. Anyone finding it would be ending up in a bad neighborhood. They're in a neighborhood where the stores are all boarded over. and the newspaper's blowing through the streets because there's nobody there. It's not a safe place to be. So Joel and I don't want to create sites that aren't havens for information. Now, luckily, this has only happened like 5 or 6 times, but we're unapologetic about shutting these sites down when they don't work. And if you're curious about firearms actually just went to beta, so you can actually go there. That one actually did make it through. So once it's in the public beta, everyone can participate. And this ultimately resolves down into Stack Exchange, the network level site where we're talking about aggregating all these different Q&A topics. So you can go to stackexchange.com and learn stuff, okay? And my classic example for this is Dig. Like, one of my big beefs with Dig was that I would go there, and every time I went to Dig, I felt a little bit stupider. I would click on a few things, and I was like, okay, I'm entertained, but God, I feel dumb now. I don't feel like that time I spent there is not working for me. So what I love about Stack Exchange is you can go to stackexchange.com and learn a ton of stuff about topics that you may not have even known that you liked. Or maybe you do know that you like them. But it's this laser-like focus on learning, and things that aren't in service of learning, things that aren't in service of furthering the topic, we actively suppress. And we try to explain to the community why we do this, what the rationale is, so they can, like us, believe in the topic. So the 5 scary things I want to leave you with today are there. And that's all I have. Thank you.